There was a moment during a recent daytime television broadcast that caught more than a few people off guard. Not a dramatic on-air row, not a resignation, not a shocking guest revelation, but something altogether more personal. Ben Shephard, one of the most familiar faces ITV has produced in the last 2 decades, sat across from colleagues he knows well and opened up about something that had been quietly gnawing at him. And when the conversation turned to health, sleep, and the unexpected anxiety that can come from trying to take care of yourself, the reaction from those around him, including his wife Annie, said everything. To understand why this moment landed the way it did, you have to understand just how much Ben Shephard means to British daytime television. For a decade, from 2014 to 2024, he was a cornerstone of Good Morning Britain, co-hosting alongside Susanna Reid, and most memorably, his dear friend Kate Garraway. The partnership between Ben and Kate became one of the most beloved on-screen relationships in the history of ITV morning television. They had chemistry that felt entirely unforced, 2 people who genuinely liked each other, who had navigated years of news cycles, controversies, emotional interviews, and early morning broadcasts together, and who emerged from all of it still smiling. When Ben left GMB in early 2024 to take on the co-host role at This Morning alongside Kat Deely, it felt like the end of a chapter that viewers hadn't quite prepared themselves to close. But Ben Shephard never really left the ITV family. He remained on screens, took on new projects, and kept himself firmly in the public eye. And in early 2025, something unexpected happened that reframed the entire conversation around Ben's public persona. He landed on the cover of Men's Health magazine, not for the first time, but in a way that genuinely stopped people in their tracks. He had turned 50 in December, and to mark the occasion, he recreated a fitness shoot he had originally done for Men's Health back in 2012, this time approaching it as a 50-year-old and a father of 2. The images were striking. The discipline was evident, and the honesty in his accompanying interview was something that resonated well beyond the fitness community. He spoke candidly about how getting stronger, both physically and mentally, becomes harder with age, describing his 40s as a time when he was still on the attack, and his 50s as a more defensive era, focused on prolonging what he has rather than simply pushing harder. What made it feel genuinely personal, though, was what he said about the people around him. His sons Sam and Jack, now 19 and 18 respectively, had become training partners. He spoke with real warmth about proving to them that he could still compete, saying he had really, truly enjoyed those moments of shared effort. And then there was Annie. His wife, who does most of the cooking at home, had worked out a kind of agreement with him. He would manage his protein intake during the day so that he could still enjoy their evenings together without it becoming a dietary negotiation at the dinner table every single night. It was a small detail, but one that revealed something genuine about their relationship. This wasn't a man performing wellness for a magazine shoot. This was someone trying, in a very human way, to hold things together while everything around him was quietly changing. Which brings us to what happened when Ben returned to the Good Morning Britain studio earlier this year, a visit that, in many ways, became one of the more unexpectedly candid moments of his entire ITV career. The appearance came about as Ben joined his longtime friend Chris Kamara to discuss their upcoming stage tour, a show revisiting defining moments from their careers and the stories behind them. Susanna Reid teased the segment warmly, noting it had been 4 years since Kamara was diagnosed with the rare neurological condition that had affected his speech, and that he was, as she put simply, back. There was genuine affection in the room, the kind of easy familiarity that comes from years of shared experience. Ben even quipped to Kate Garraway, still very much part of the GMB fabric, "Don't you forget me, Garraway," a line that got a laugh, but also carried a quiet undercurrent of something far more tender. But it was later in that same visit that the health conversation took a turn nobody quite anticipated. During a segment exploring sleep technology and the growing debate around wearable health trackers, a colleague noticed something on Ben's hand and asked about it. It was an Oura Ring, a high-tech wearable that tracks sleep stages, blood oxygen levels, heart rate, and daily activity. Ben explained that he had initially been drawn to it more for tracking exercise than monitoring sleep, and that seeing positive feedback from the device had sometimes given him a welcome sense of momentum when he needed it most. But then the conversation shifted into territory that felt considerably less comfortable. The discussion turned to a phenomenon that sleep researchers have been paying increasing attention to in recent years, a condition known as orthosomnia. It describes a preoccupation with achieving perfect sleep, where the very act of obsessively monitoring rest can create a layer of anxiety that ends up undermining the quality of sleep itself. In other words, the tool you reach for to try and improve your health can, if you are not careful, quietly become the source of an entirely new kind of stress. For anyone who has woken up and immediately grabbed their phone to check a sleep score, only to feel a pang of disappointment or unease at the number staring back at them, the concept is immediately and uncomfortably recognizable. What made the moment land emotionally was Ben's frankness about it. Here was a man who had spent months publicly championing health, fitness, and physical discipline, who had put himself on a magazine cover to demonstrate that 50 did not have to mean slowing down, now acknowledging openly that the very tools designed to support that journey carried a shadow side. The idea that obsessing over data, even health data gathered with the best possible intentions, could become its own quiet form of anxiety is one that connects with a huge number of people. Particularly those navigating the pressures of high-profile careers, demanding schedules, and the weight of expectations that come with being publicly visible and apparently thriving. What added another layer to this conversation was the mention of Annie. Ben revealed that his wife had also been using the device, in her case, to better understand her own sleep patterns. Annie is not someone who courts public attention by any stretch. She works in garden and interior design, and Ben has spoken before about how she values her private life and her solitude far more than the celebrity world he inhabits on a daily basis. So the idea of Annie quietly tracking her sleep at home and potentially finding herself caught in the same loop of data-driven self-scrutiny added something to the conversation that felt unexpectedly real and deeply relatable. This was no longer just a presenter talking about a gadget. This was a couple, a long-married, private, genuinely devoted couple, navigating something that millions of ordinary households across Britain are quietly experiencing right now, whether they realize it or not. The segment sparked genuine reflection, both inside the studio and among viewers watching at home. Because what Ben was really describing, in his carefully measured and good-humored way, was something sitting right at the intersection of modern wellness culture and the quiet, unspoken pressures of middle life. When you have built your public identity partly around being fit, capable, and energetic, what happens when the data tells a different story on a bad morning? What happens when the ring on your finger says your recovery is low, your deep sleep was inadequate, and you are heading into a long day of filming regardless? Ben had reflected on the reality of being in his 50s with a kind of unsentimental clarity that stayed with people. He spoke about being much more conscious now of the time he has, aware, in a way he perhaps was not in his 30s or 40s, that the years ahead are finite and worth protecting. That kind of honesty, coming from someone who spent a decade delivering the morning news with polished calm and good-natured authority, carries real weight. It does not make for comfortable listening, but it makes for necessary listening, and there is a difference. For Good Morning Britain itself, moments like this are a reminder of exactly why the program continues to matter in the British television landscape. At its best, GMB does not simply deliver headlines and move on. It creates the conditions for genuine, unscripted conversation. The kind that meanders from a theatrical tour announcement to a debate about sleep trackers to a quiet personal reckoning with aging and anxiety, all before 9 o'clock in the morning. The show has navigated extraordinary turbulence over the years, presenter controversies, editorial debates, the extraordinary personal stories that Kate Garraway's years on the program brought into living rooms across the country. Through all of it, the moments that genuinely stay with viewers are the ones that feel unplanned and honest. Ben Shephard returning to that studio, sitting among colleagues who know him well, and speaking openly about the ways in which even a sincere commitment to good health can become its own source of quiet worry. That was one of those moments. It did not need conflict to make its point. It did not need a headline. It just needed honesty, and there was plenty of it on display. Where this leaves Ben going forward is, in many ways, a natural continuation of the chapter he began when he stepped off the GMB sofa for the final time. He is by all accounts doing well at this morning, well regarded by viewers and by the guests he brings through the door. The portrait that emerges across all of it is of a man who has made a successful transition and is doing the work, real work, not performative work, to stay healthy and present, and who is honest enough with himself and with the public to admit that doing the work does not mean all the answers come easily or that the journey is without its harder days. That combination of visibility and genuine vulnerability is rarer in television than it should be, is what made his years on Good Morning Britain so compelling and so watchable, and is clearly not something he left behind when he moved to a different sofa on a different program. So what do you make of Ben's candid conversation about health, obsession, and the surprising pressures that come with trying to take care of yourself? It clearly touched a nerve, and rightly so. Drop your thoughts in the comments. This is exactly the kind of conversation worth having. If stories like this one are your thing, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. There's always more beneath the surface than the headlines let on.